So, Netflix Bebop. Man, what do I say about this that hasn't already been said 100 times over on numerous different videos? This show has been a interesting roller coaster for the past, I'd say, about 3 weeks on YouTube and different magazines, be it Hollywood Reporter, Variety, places like that. And it's not been good by and large. It's been very mixed reception for Netflix Bebop. So I guess I was making this video because I decided what is my advice going into the show, and what are some things I've noticed that some of these reviewers are saying both fairly and unfairly about the show. So right off the bat, the show ain't good. It's just flat out not good. And I don't mean in comparison to the original anime. We'll get to that later. But just as it stands on its own, it's not a great show. It's not atrocious, like some people are making it out to be, like this just god-awful, unwatchable thing. But it's mediocre at best. In its best moments, it's actually fairly entertaining. I really like... The back half is a lot better. Episodes 6, 7, and 8 are a lot better. 9 is something. But the front half, the front 5 hours, it's rough. I had to force myself to watch it. I didn't care. I had to force myself to watch that, and that's a bad sign. And if you see me looking down, it's because I have notes. But I think that's an important distinction we have to make, is that this isn't the original. It has a lot of issues, and we'll get into that more, but at least as the showrunners claim, they were trying to be different. It kind of failed in a lot of aspects of that, but we'll get into it. It was trying to be different. It wasn't trying to be a shot-for-shot recreation of Cowboy Bebop. And so I don't think you can hold it to the exact same standard of the original. I think you do have to look at it as its own thing. And what I like to say is, if this show was not called Cowboy Bebop, none of the characters were named the same, I would look at this and go, oh, an okay Cowboy Bebop ripoff. Okay. Like, wouldn't watch it again, but I mean, I didn't hate it. It's not awful, but and that's where part of the issue comes into, and I think this speaks to a larger issue on fandoms, is a lot of people who have seen the original are trashing it, hardcore, because they're taking that bias in there. And believe me, I understand. There were moments where I got visibly angry because of how it kind of treated source material. But then there are some people, and you kind of know who you are. Not that anybody watches this channel, so because it's the first video, so who cares? But there are people who are saying this show is awful, and they have not seen it. They've watched maybe the first half of the first episode, and some clips here and there, and just still images and trendy clickbait, little clips, and say, "Oh, it's awful." That's not fair. You can't say that. You have to give it a fair shake and sit down and watch it. I'm not saying you have to sit there and watch the entire season, but you got to watch at least 3 or 4 episodes to say, yeah, I'm not sticking with this. It's not worth my time. But just to say, yeah, I watched 20 minutes. It was awful. I couldn't bear it. That's not fair. There's some great movies that start out like super slow. There are great TV shows that start out super slow, and then they get a lot better. So I don't think that's fair. So with that out of the way, let's kind of talk about what works in Netflix Bebop. First off, I would say it's the character dynamics, how they interact with each other, specifically Faye, Spike, and Jet. Look, I think the show would have been great had that been 90% of the show, is you just got those 3 in a room talking. They were great. The banter was hilarious. How they interacted with each other, the mannerisms were really good. And there was a lot of chemistry there. I think those 3 really enjoyed working together. Some of the things that worked, I would say, is how faithfully they recreated the show. I think they've been getting a lot of flack for the scenes looking bad, and they look like it was like just a poor budget. I think that's a limitation on adapting this world. It's a post-apocalyptic, space western. It's a very weird thing, and that's just one of those things that doesn't translate well to the screen. And I think what they did, and I think this was smart, they embraced that it looked a little cartoony. I think any other way would have looked forced and weird. So I appreciate that. I don't think that's a bad thing. All the ship models, like the Bebop, looks great. The actual ship, it looks really good. The Swordfish looks amazing. One limitation is that just because it have to all be CGI, and this is not some, $300 million Marvel movie, they don't get to have the dogfights and the ship scenes like they do in the original. And you never were going to get that, So, other than that, I think they work around the sets pretty well, so. The shootouts are pretty good. Not the fistfights. Let me be specific. The shootouts are good. The shootouts were pretty cool. There's a lot of interesting guns. I thought it was hilarious when Faye pulls out the AR, and it has like an actual like aim-point probe. It has a light on. It's an actual like proper looking how like a former cop would set up his patrol rifle. It worked. They were given realistic guns. The gunplay was pretty good. The one too many like Hollywood isms, 57 rounds before they had to reload, absolutely no recoil, wasn't that bad. The only two gripes I have with that is in the intro sequence, where it's hand drawn, and this is just a recreation of the original, was you'll see it's Spike's Jericho, and then in this it's Jet's Chiappa Rhino, and then it's Faye's Glock. And they go, boom, 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 and then you get it from the front, where the barrels are facing you. Well, facing you. The problem was, they went Jericho and the Glock were right. They made the revolver wrong. I don't know if they've just never seen the Chiappa Rhino or don't know how it works. I don't understand how they missed this, because they have a set gun. But for those who don't understand, Google a Chiappa Rhino, the revolver Jet used. A normal revolver has the barrel line up with the top of the cylinder where the rounds are. A Chiappa Rhino comes out the bottom, so the barrel would sit low. Like, if you think this is a normal gun, it'd be more like that. And they didn't. They just put like a model like 29 or something, like Smith & Wesson model 29 as the model, and that was just lazy. The only other gripe I had is, again with the revolver, there's a shootout, I think it's Session 3, which is a loose recreation of Ein's backstory, and when they were chasing Hakeem, and there's a scene where Jet is having a shootout with Hakeem, and he shoots 8 rounds. Chiappa Rhino doesn't hold 8 rounds. Unless there's some new model I don't know about, it holds 6 rounds. There's some wiggle room in semi-automatic guns, magazine fed. It's like, did he really, there's some fudging there. With the revolver, it's pretty solidly 6 or 8 rounds, depending on the model, and usually it's 6. The other thing that worked great was Jet. Mustafa Shakir, sorry if I butchered your name, was absolutely great as Jet. He was the best casting. He had all the mannerisms down. His attitude, his presence was great. Every single line he delivered is something I'm like, Jet would totally say that. So I think they did a fantastic job with him. I am sorry to hear about his back surgery that will be needed, because he carried this show for a large portion of the show. So, with that said, let's move on to what doesn't work with Bebop, and this will take substantially longer. So the biggest problem right out the gate, at least visible problem, Vicious. Vicious was awful. He was terrible. Like, hands down, one of the worst portrayals of a villain I've seen. I'm not familiar with Alex Hassel enough. I haven't seen him in other things to say if he's a bad actor. I don't think he is. Just think they gave him the worst lines, and they wrote him terribly. And directors just did not know how to direct him. I don't know. The writers what they were going for is this whiny, daddy's boy, entitled jerk who has rage issues. And they got that, and it sucked. The problem is, Vicious is the big bad of the series, at least season 1. Going to spoilers later, but at least for season 1, he's the big villain. At no point in this show was I concerned that Vicious was capable enough to be a threat to Spike, Jet, and Faye. He's not. And the writers make it a point. They constantly tear him down. Show him to be incapable, show him to be a loser, show him to be weak, show him to be out of control with his emotions, and not capable of doing anything. So why are we, the viewers, scared of him? Why would we be concerned? He is the grown-up version of Draco Malfoy, just more murdery. The problem is, Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter isn't the big bad. That's Voldemort. Voldemort is capable. He's intimidating. Draco Malfoy is the foil to Harry. He's in opposition. He's his bully. He's a person used to make Harry better by comparing him, but also giving him hardships to overcome. He isn't meant to be intimidating like this threat. He's a challenge for Harry to overcome in preparation for his ultimate challenge, which is fighting Voldemort. That doesn't work as the main villain. I'll put it this way. A great show. Phineas and Ferb. Who's the bad guy? It's Dr. Doofenshmirtz. And they constantly tear him down. They constantly show he's inept, he's smart, and he's capable, but he's a horrible evil scientist. But that's the joke. That's the point. There's no true antagonist of the show. And that's why it works when you have this inept villain. Because he's meant to be inept. But it serves the show. It serves to make the point. Okay, so next on what does not work. Julia. I don't know what the writers were thinking when they gave her arc. Because the entire season she stays very meek and is under the thumb of Vicious and Syndicate, and she wants to get out of it. That's her entire goal. And this is at the very end, when they botch Ballad of Fallen Angels, they make the twist where she now wants to be the head of the Syndicate and turns on Vicious. It makes sense she turns on Vicious. She doesn't like him. She hates him. She tried to have him killed. Makes sense. But now she wants power. I can see where they were going with this. This idea that she's tired of being, weak and controlled, that now she wants to be in charge. But they didn't set it up. They at no point say, that she tried to make moves and get out from things. That, it would make more sense if she had orchestrated, Spike getting captured or them kidnapping Jet's daughter. Like, that would make more sense. I just don't really know what they were thinking. Also, they changed her backstory a little bit. In the original anime, there's a scene in Ballad of Fallen Angels where she's humming and singing to Spike as he's resting in bed. And so there's this thing about her singing. They just make her a nightclub singer, which is fine. Doesn't really hurt anything. But they keep building it up. They even have the scene where her, Vicious, and Mao are making this deal, and the one condition that Vicious won't do, but that Mao wants, solely to put Vicious down again, because we haven't had enough of that, is for Julia to sing, which really makes him mad. It's apparently now it's a sore subject. They don't explain that well. But she does it, and she sings this song. And then, in the flashback episode 9, we get the backstory of how she became a singer. I guess she was a singer, and she sang at Anna's. And she sings the exact same song. Okay, maybe it's the long version. No. It's literally 4 lines that she just repeats. And it's not even that good. I'm not trying to say, Ellis Satine can't sing. But, if you keep building this up like this, she was this amazing nightclub singer, and, that's how Spike fell in love with her, you better bust out Mariah Carey. That was pathetic. The singing itself wasn't pathetic, but just the setup. It was poor. It was bad. I did not care. I was like, that was it? And, you have Yoko Kanno. And you couldn't come up with more lyrics than that. I doubt she wrote that. I 100% doubt she wrote that. It was... Also, relating to Julia, part of the original anime was they never fully explained Spike, Julia, and Vicious's history. You got hints and you got teases, and you know that Spike and Julia have a connection, that Julia and Vicious were at one point together. You don't know for how long, how that worked, but that was the thing. You just knew there was history, and it worked. You didn't need to know. In this, there's no sense of subtlety, as a lot of people have been saying. They explained the whole thing. And how it worked is that Vicious and Spike were at the club when Julia sang. They both fell in love with her. Vicious, being from money that he is, started to woo her. They went out for several weeks. Spike never interacted with her since that night. He actually didn't even interact with her that time, but did not interact with her at all. She only knew of him secondhand through Vicious. And they all go out for drinks one night. Vicious is being a jerk, gets drunk, so Spike and her dance, do a line dance, have a photo taken, and then he takes her home after Vicious decides he's going to beat a guy to death. That was the whole interaction? I get Spike's in love with the chick. Love at first sight. She's not to him. There's not enough there. If you're going to explain why they're in love, you got to explain it. You mean to tell me that from that interaction, this one night, Spike decides, he's going to cheat on his best friend? Like, his best friend's girl, going to cheat on her with him. However that, you know what I'm saying. He's going to be the other guy, his best friend, the guy who took him in. He is going to then kill an entire gang to cover his tracks and help Vicious so he can get away. He's going to run away from the syndicate, which he knows is a death sentence. He will be running for the rest of his life, and Julia's. They will never be safe. And he's also going to turn his back on the syndicate, who has been his family his entire life. They're the people that took him in. I'm not saying they're good people, but I'm just saying there's a loyalty there. It didn't make sense. The sex was not that good. No sex is that good in one night. Let's be honest. It's not. Okay, so moving on. Jet. Jet himself was good. The problem with Jet is they changed his backstory. In the original, he was a good cop in a corrupt system. He was like the one good cop. He got tired of it, and he left after an incident where he was chasing the assassin, and he got injured, couldn't do it anymore. In this, it's the reversal. He gets framed for being corrupt by the one guilty cop, by the one corrupt cop, who isn't him, which is his partner. Every other cop is good. Why? You've ruined his struggle. You've taken away the thing that made him him. He was a by-the-book, straight-laced guy. You know, he did things the old-fashioned way to a fault. You've taken that away from him. Because everybody else was the same. He no longer has the moral authority, or at least the perceived moral authority, that defined his character. He didn't have that anymore. And then they gave him an ex-wife and a daughter. In the original, he did have an ex-girlfriend, but that was one episode, and that was more his struggle with being controlling. That's what that was talking about. In this, it's that they're making him out to be a deadbeat dad, which making a black guy a deadbeat dad, it's a little on the nose there. But they make him out to be this deadbeat dad, and she's blaming him for being gone and missing their daughter's life. He was framed. He didn't do anything wrong. That's like getting mad at a guy for, missing your daughter's birth when he was getting carjacked. It wasn't his fault. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. And so it just doesn't, and he's treated like this jerk, and an old coworker, Chalmers, is now dating or married to his ex-wife, and they just treat him like he's this horrible person, but he didn't do anything wrong. It didn't make any sense. I don't understand. Okay, next is Faye. Faye had the most stark changes. So one everybody's complaining about or some people, morons, are complaining about her outfit. That would have been horrible to shoot. I do not blame them for changing that. That yellow, plasticky outfit, oh boy, that would be a nightmare. I will say, it probably would have been cool if she wore it once, and Like, they tie it into the story, just a bit of fan service. I like that, but, you know, not upset about that. The biggest changes were her personality and backstory, significantly. Her personality. In the original, Faye is this femme fatale. She's kind of got a better-than-you attitude, and kind of bratty. But it's to hide pain. It's to push people away, so she, you know, because she's been hurt, and you understand that. In this, she's this like hyperactive, like pick-me girl. Like I don't understand why, and she just is very abrasive, and I don't understand that. They also changed her backstory. In the original, she is a bounty hunter who has amnesia because of being put in cryosleep. She's 77 years old. In this, they kept the cryosleep part and the amnesia. They left out the part where she's in massive debt, like millions of dollars worth of debt, because of, one, the medical bills from being in cryosleep, which she, if you kind of think about consent and how that works, she has amnesia. She didn't remember consenting to that, especially for that time period. You're not supposed to be held that long. The whole reason she was put in cryosleep is because the medical technology of when she was put in wasn't up to snuff to fix her injuries. She wasn't, you know, woken up till later. So, you know, she's been asleep 50 years. She's missed out on her entire world's gone. And that's explored. This isn't. It didn't as much. It started leading into it, but they kind of jump sharks. I don't know. But they left out the entire debt. And also the part where she took on even more debt because the person who pretended to be her lawyer and she fell in love with was a con man. He faked his death and then stuck her with all of his debt. And they changed her for a woman, con woman, who pretended to be her mother. Which that can work, but I think the debt is an important part to Faye's character. It describes why she's constantly running and she's constantly, you know, looking for easy money. And it paints her more as a survivor than they do in the live action. I'm saying I don't know a lot because I don't know what they were thinking. People are a little up in arms about her being... I don't think it explicitly says which one she is, either bi or a lesbian. I don't really care. If anybody in the original cast was going to be bi or gay, it was going to be Faye. Like, that's the clearest choice, because it makes sense. She doesn't have any pre-existing relationships, except for the guy she fell in love with, but she can just be bi. And they also got rid of that, so that doesn't matter. My problem with it, though, is how they handled it. They handled it poorly. Very poorly. So we find this out, I think it's episode 5. It's either 5 or 6, I can't remember. I don't remember them. God, having watched all of them, they're trying to repress the memories. But the episode starts off, it is a mechanic, female mechanic, working on the ship, working on the Bebop, haggling with Jet about a part. Jet has to go do something. He tells Faye to watch the mechanic, make sure she doesn't, upcharge them. A 5-minute conversation. I'm not exaggerating. 5-minute conversation. Boom, in the sheets. They hook up. Like, what? I get we play a little fast and loose with the hanky-panky nowadays, but that was startling. And also the comments the mechanic made. Like, she used this really creepy pickup line. I can't remember it exactly, but it was like, had a guy said that to Faye, people would be up in arms. People would be furious that happened. But it's okay because she's a lesbian. Like, why? I don't understand. And then the next episode, we open and Faye's sitting on the pier reading Playboys. Like, and talking about, like, I can't figure out if I'm a boob or a butt girl. And, like, looking at, like, BDSM magazines. Like, what on earth? And I think that ties into one of the larger issues with the show. The netbop, as I like to call it, is horny. Like, really horny. And it goes with the fact that they just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's to distance themselves from the original, I don't know if it's just to seem more mature, what it is, but it is hellbent on just being adult for the sake of being adult. The best example of this is a line in, I think it's episode 3, where Jet is talking to an informant, this old, redheaded, well-endowed cougar. There's no other way to put her. She's a cougar who's also an informant named Woodcock. Yes. And he says something to the effect of, well, I'd like the information. She says, well, what do I get out of it? And he says, well, I'm happy to give you a cut. She was thinking, I'd rather have dinner, you, me, bottle of whatever. And he says, that sounds like blackmail. And she goes, dang straight it is, because you, Jet, are black and you are male. I'm going to play the clip here. I'm going to insert it.
I was thinking less along the lines of cash, more along the lines of dinner. Me, you, bottle of Chianti, 2 bottles if we're feeling dangerous.
Sounds to me like blackmail.
You're damn right it is, because Jet, you are black and you are male.
How was that allowed to be written? Like, is it funny? Yes, in a terrible sense. I can't believe they just said that sense. Like, Tommy Wiseau, The Room level funny. As in, it's so bad, it's funny. Hand in hand with the horniness, in the adultness, is Bebop swears a lot. And the original had swearing. But this one just, it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel part of the world. It feels like they're all trying. It feels like the kid in middle school who just learned the new swear words, and he's like, oh, I'm going to say this so I'm cool. That's what it sounds like, especially Faye. She swears constantly for no reason. She just has a potty mouth. And I don't mean to be all like, oh, Bible kid about it, but like, it's just unnecessary. To give an example, another movie where it makes sense with all the swearing and crudeness is Lone Survivor. You know why? Because it's about a bunch of Navy SEALs. It's about a bunch of people who go through really difficult situations, and the dark comedy and crude nature is how they cope. That makes sense. It's immersive into the world. This doesn't. It doesn't make sense at all why they act like this and why they talk like this, especially Faye. I don't understand. Okay, so the protagonist, as he is Spike, or as they like to call him, Fearless. Okay, Fearless. Jeez. The decision to change his name, like when he was in the city, call him Fearless, and then he changes his name to Spike. I can understand if they wanted to name him something else and they changed his name to Spike Spiegel because he's on the run. That makes sense. That's a logical conclusion. Why'd they pick Fearless? The only thing I can surmise is they thought, well, the villain's name is Vicious. But even that doesn't hold up because no one else in the syndicate has these weird names. Vicious's right-hand man and woman are Shin and Lin. Their old boss is named Stax. Vicious's dad, who's one of the elders, is named Caliphate, I think. Something like that. But it's not these weird adjective names. Like, there's not, fearless, vicious, reckless, boneheaded. These people don't exist. Brutal. They don't exist. It was just dumb. It didn't make sense. I like the headcanon a lot more that Vicious had a normal name and that was a nickname he earned. Like, because he was so vicious, he earned the nickname. Pardon me. Poorly unprofessional. But he earned the nickname. And they could have easily worked that in. They easily could have said that. Like, he had a normal name, and then even the scene in the flashback episode where he beats the guy to death and then, rips his teeth out and burns them. That would have been a perfect option. After that, he's called Vicious. Perfect. Name him Tom beforehand. Who cares? But it just, I don't know. A lot of people have an issue with the fact that John Cho is 50, or getting on 50, and Spike is supposed to be in his mid to late 20s. That didn't really bug me because John Cho does not look 50. I hope I look like John Cho when I'm 50 years old. That would be great. He aged beautifully. He's a very handsome man, let's be honest. The bigger issue, I think, is he did well with the mannerisms, kind of the cool persona of Spike. And I blame this more on the writers, but he did not get what Spike's about, his psychology. And I think this speaks to a larger issue that I'm going to get into. But there's a lot of things that happened in the anime and they did this in the Pierre LaFaux episode, they kind of did it. But one thing Spike constantly did is he constantly rushed headfirst into danger. Like, no qualms, go get in unnecessarily hard situations and keep the other people from helping him. And one, it might be done out of a sense of, I don't want them to get involved in my problems, but also just a fact of, he has a death wish. Like, it's his running joke in the original anime, but it's true, he has a death wish. He doesn't want to be alive. Or, there are many great video essays on Spike's psychology. Wisecrack is a good one. I think Chris Stackman has a pretty good one. Many very great video essays. Just look them up. But there's this whole notion that Spike is stuck in the past and doesn't actually know if he's alive or dead. It's a whole thing. And so he keeps putting himself in these absurd situations to kind of prove if he's alive or not. Is he really living? Both in a actual concrete reality standpoint, but also from a perspective standpoint. That didn't happen here. He doesn't act like this, and that was a lot of Spike's driving force. Was the old life, he's stuck in it. Even though he's not a hitman anymore, he's not in the syndicate, he's stuck in it. He can't get away from his past. Where in this, it feels more like he is trying to run from his past. And one thing Spike did is he didn't want to take boring bounties. That was just, Jet constantly tried to convince him, hey, take the small bounties, they're easy money. In this, Spike doesn't do that. There's this whole interaction with him and Faye where he does not want to go after bigger bounties. In part because he doesn't trust her to handle herself, but also because it feels like he just doesn't want to get involved. And that's not what Spike's about. So I think they just mischaracterized him. Kind of hand in hand with Spike is some of the fight scenes. They just weren't as good as the original, and they never could be. It's something that's coming from animation to live action, you're never going to get as good. But they could have done a lot better. They feel very robotic. They feel very staged. And the camera, the cinematography was used. They were hiding things, let's be honest, and it shows. And I don't think you have an excuse anymore when you get shows like Into the Badlands, which are still very kung fu-y, I guess, for lack of a better term, and they feel it. But they're so much more dynamic, and they're so much more interesting to watch, which that is more akin to Cowboy Bebop the anime than this. Or you have movies like John Wick, which just go hyper-realistic, and it's great. They could have done a lot better with fight sequences. So, been waiting to circle to this part. Gren. Gren is interesting. Gren is an oh boy moment. There have been a lot of backlash and a lot of big things thrown around about Gren. We're fixing the anime and woke people, everybody's losing their mind. I falls somewhere in the middle. I think, okay, so first off, the actor who plays Gren, Mason Alexander Park, is openly non-binary. Okay, cool. Don't really care. They're an actor. They're being a part. Who cares? And they made Gren non-binary in the show. That's a tough one. I don't know if... I think it fits. I see why they did it. But I think they lose some of the nuance with Gren from the original. Because the original Gren was born a man, was a man, but then had horrible things done to them, had these experiments and done to them, and were subjected to drugs in prison because of Vicious, that they kind of, for lack of a better term, gain gender dysphoria. And it was great representation back then, and really started, asking the questions. And, and a lot of people have misinterpreted what Mason Alexander Park said in an interview. I'm going to link it down below so you can read it for yourself. A lot of people read the headlines and read a few lines and took from it. But then other people like said things that weren't in the interview. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said like, oh, they didn't say that they were talking about Sleepaway, like some movie. I didn't see that. Okay. But what is kind of getting misquoted is Mason Alexander Park said that they and the showrunners, the crew, we'll say collectively, were writing some of the issues with the anime. That's not quite what he meant. It is technically what they. Anyway, so that's a whole issue. I think they got misquoted. I don't think they were trying to offend anybody saying that they were fixing the anime or they had a right to. But I think that leads into, also in the interview, Park confirmed that Gren wasn't really supposed to be in this season. They were supposed to be in season 2. And because of the hiatus, because of COVID, and also John Cho being injured, the writers went back and decided, and the directors went back and decided, let's put Gren in here. And you can tell. They are so shoehorned in, they do nothing, they have no role, and ironically enough, they are forced into being the token gay friend. All they do is stand around in fabulous outfits and say sassy comments. And get thrown over a table one time like that. That's it. That's all they do. They had nothing. If they weren't there, nothing would change. And that's hilarious. In an effort to be more inclusive, they made one of the worst examples of just a stereotypical, like, queer person. Like, Modern Family had better representation. So many things had better representation. That was horrible. It just comes back to they made decisions that didn't make sense. Put people where they really weren't supposed to be. And that's on the writers and the directors and the showrunners. So. Okay, I'm going to briefly touch about Ed. Ed had like 40 seconds of screen time, so... And people were freaking out saying it was cringy and it's horrible. It was cringy. It was bad. I'm going to be very, 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 very clear. I am not commenting on the child actor. It's a child actor. Eden Perkins. That is a child actor. I think this was their first professional role. I do not hold this against them at all. They don't know any better. And they have a lot of enthusiasm. If you watch some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, they really were trying. They were really putting in their all. And I hope they have a great career. Best of wishes to them. However, the cinematographers and the directors and the writers should have known better. And you're going to keep hearing that. It's a whole thing. There's a long gripe, don't worry. They should have known better than to have Ed full in Spike's face, the full POV shot, going, Spike Spiegel, screaming in our face. That was the worst. The rest of it really wasn't even that bad. It was fine. But that shot is so cringy. Someone should have gone to Edith and said, not like that. You're doing great, but we're just a little different. And that is a failing on the director. The multiple directors. There was 20, I don't know how many freaking directors there were. It changed every episode, and we'll get into that. So, people are making out a huge tragedy. I feel like it's just another cut, death by 1,000 cuts at this point. Okay, so having talked about all of the individual characters, kind of getting into more of the thematic issues and the chronic issues of NetBop. NetBop cannot decide, and this is what holds it back in a lot of ways, if it wants to be a one-for-one remake or do its own thing. It does the worst of both worlds. Almost every single episode, except for 9, is a direct ripoff of one of the previous sessions, another episode. And I say ripoff in that it follows the same story beats, but it changes so many things that you make the diehard fans mad, because you're that's not right, it's not supposed to be that way. And then you also can't please the other people who just say, well, I didn't want a one-for-one remake, but I just want more stories in that world. You didn't give them either. You did neither, and it shows. And it makes people mad. And it's like, it just goes back to this thing of, it feels like the writers and the showrunners and directors did not respect the source material. I'm sure they've seen it. I'm sure they like it. But it feels like they didn't have someone at the helm going, what would Shinichiro Watanabe say? What is the message? What are the themes? What are the morals? What are the teachings of Cowboy Bebop? And are we applying that here? We want to make it different, take changes, that's fine. And I think that happens in a lot of shows and a lot of IPs where you get sequels or remakes or whatever, and the situations are different, but the story is the same, the message. Take Star Wars, for example. Rogue One is very, very different from the rest of the Star Wars films, but it's one of the best. It's like number 3. Because the main message was about someone choosing to fight for good and hope. That's what Star Wars is all about, is hope. And it succeeded in that. And it took risks. It was way more violent, way darker than the other ones. There were no Jedi. There were no lightsabers, except for Vader at the very end, but that was more fan service than anything. So it can be done. It's just you have to listen and understand what is the IP about. And it feels like they didn't do that. They just did not care and said, let's take some of the cool moments and iconic things that we can throw in a trailer and put it in there, like the entire episode 10 with Rain and the Ballad of Fall of Angels. They just took that shot for shot just so they could put it in the trailer, and so we would see it. And people were like, oh, I want to watch that. Let me click on that. And it shows. And this goes into a larger gripe about like remakes in general, but there is an attitude, and this, one of the actresses, Daniela Pineda, kind of caught some flack because she did what you never do. Never feed the trolls. I don't think she was trying to be mean or anything, or trying to be disrespectful, but the second you poke the trolls, they poke back hard and you will lose. I don't care how right you are, you're gonna lose. It just never ends well in these situations. Amber Heard is a great example. Don't do that. What's her? Brie Larson has gotten so much hate because of what she said about Captain Marvel. Now she was way more abrupt about her comments, but it just goes it never pans out well. It never does. Just don't accept the criticism. I fully understand it probably gets under their skins, but especially the trolls who just say things that aren't true and just hurtful, but just, you're a public figure, you gotta let that wash off. If I had anyways. But it does tie into a larger criticism, which is this attitude of that we didn't make this for you. That's what a lot of these people say, like specifically Brie Larson, when Captain Marvel was made. I remember it was at either an award show, I think it was an award show, and she said, or some speech engagement, where she said, I didn't make this movie for you. She's talking about, the fad, Mom's Basement fans who were mad Captain Marvel got changed. Yes and no. You don't gotta make it for the trolls. But people imply, and what gets construed is that we didn't make this for the old fans. Yes, you did. You know why whatever given studio greenlit this production? Because there's a huge fan base. Because people have shown and said, we will watch more if you make more. The first one performed well. Let's make another. That's how these sequels and remakes work. That's the reason they're making another Ghostbusters. That's the reason they made the whole sequel Star Wars trilogy. And they're on the second how many TV shows since Disney bought the rights. In how many Marvel movies are we into now? We gotta be hitting 30 at this point. Because the other ones succeeded. They want more. So that doesn't work and it doesn't hold up. It's just logically invalid. And I think that's what angers me and a lot of other fans the most, is NetBop producers and the showrunners and writers took a very, very, very beloved property. It's one of those iconic things. And then they didn't honor the source material. I'm not saying you had to 100% recreate it, but like I said, just take the message and what's important. And also, they kind of treated it like they could butcher it up for their own uses. A great example was Session 1, which is Session 1 from the original, is in the end when Asimov and Katarina are in the spaceship trying to outrun Spike, and they hit the blockade of police. They changed it a lot in the new version. In the new version, it's now Katarina driving. Asimov is dying because Faye shot him in the neck. And also her and Spike are having this weird over-the-intercom conversation. And it ruins Road to the West, the track. That track was so impactful in the original. No one said anything. The only line that got told was Katarina just said goodbye to Spike. And it wasn't even like to him over the intercom. It was just, for him, just mouthed it. But it was the gauge, it was the acknowledgement, it was the moment that meant so much. They didn't have to say anything. In this, they totally changed the meaning. In the original, it was, in the original, and spoiler for the original. In the original, Asimov is trying to outrun. Katarina decides she shoots him and then charges headfirst into the police guns because she knows there's no way out, but she wants to be with him. There's no escape. And that's impactful for Spike because this is a warning. Because it's saying, this is what's happened to you if you can't let Julia go, that we're going to find out about later. That's what this whole thing's about. In this, that doesn't have the same meaning. In this, it just seems like a woman who just lost everything and she just wants to die now. Okay. It just completely did not work. And then I've brought it up multiple times. The Battle of Fallen Angels, they just ripped it all off. And they ruined it. And then they even tried to do Greenbird. But they changed the whole thing. The whole point was that was the flashback montage where we got the backstory in the original. They didn't have it. I don't know what they were doing. But they wanted to play Greenbird because it's the iconic song. It's probably one of the best moments in anime. We can't have it without it. The biggest offender in this was at the very end of Session 10. Now, for those who don't know, Cowboy Bebop, the end of every episode, it will say, when it fades to black, will say, have a little line. Usually it's see you later, Space Cowboy. Sometimes it's different given on the episode. At the series finale, Real Folk Blues Part 2, at the very end, it said, the line reads, "You're going to carry that weight." And it summarizes the whole thing. I won't spoil it, but it summarizes the entire show and the message. They used that. Bebop did in the season finale. That was insulting. I got mad. I yelled at my computer screen when I saw that. Because that is disrespectful. It's just flat out. It's disrespectful. You took one of the most impactful lines. You took something that summarized the entire show in a couple words, and it was the final thing we saw as fans. It was the ending of the story. And you used it for your stupid cliffhanger season ending that you're totally trying to set up for season 2. You ruined the meaning of it. Are you going to use it again next season? No, you're not supposed to. There's a finale. There's a finality to it. I'm mispronouncing that word, I know. But that just, it made me so mad. And I just, oof. I think it shows, now Shinichiro Watanabe is technically credited as a consultant. Bullcrap. Someone posted online, I cannot verify if this is true, but I 100% believe it, is that he was given, early scripts and early short ideas and gave notes, but he has not been involved in the process whatsoever, and they probably paid him a buttload of money, made him sign NDAs, so he wouldn't bash the show. I guarantee you that's what happened. They are doing exactly what Disney did to Mark Hamill and George Lucas. Because remember, Mark Hamill complained after The Last Jedi. He said it didn't feel like Luke, and then he shut up. I wonder why. Do you think it's because Disney started threatening him or offering him a lot of money? Yeah, probably. So that's, I could keep going, but we'll call it there. You know, there's a lot of problems with Cowboy Bebop. There could be, not a diamond, maybe like a, not even a pearl, maybe like an amethyst somewhere deep down in the dirt. But some good things could come out of it. They made some major changes. I think this show could be fixed. So next we'll go into what are my recommendations to fix season 2, because they're totally gonna. Wait, what now? It got canceled. So, right as I got done writing the script, and then was gonna film it, I went out, and then I saw on Twitter they canceled it. I can't say I'm surprised because it did so badly, but I am a little surprised because they poured so much money into it. You'd think they just force it to work. Just beat it like a dead horse like they do with Transformer movies. Those have been awful for years and they keep making them. Or the Fast and Furious movies, good God. Oy. But, and a lot of it has to do with, I think I saw a Hollywood Reporter article where it said it came out to, very poor critical reviews, like in the 40s and 50s. And then it had about 74 million views, like opening week, but then it by almost 60% it dropped. So people got tired of it fast, and I think that shows. I think a lot of people probably tuned in for the first couple episodes, and then it went down hard. Nobody wanted to finish it, which is kind of sad because the last half is actually the better half. But say la vie. So instead of taking this time to suggest what they should fix, because that's null and void now, I guess I'm going to take this time to speak to remakes on a larger level and what Hollywood needs to do to make them work if they're going to be insistent on keep doing it. My advice is stop doing them. These remakes and adaptations, stop doing them. Be original for once in your life. But if you're insistent on doing it, a couple things that we need to start keeping in mind. The biggest thing is companies need to start picking showrunners, especially when handling these beloved IPs, who understand and appreciate and love the source material, almost to an encyclopedic knowledge. I'm going to point to Dave Filoni with The Mandalorian. He is a great example of what should be done. Because, kind of loosely put, the hierarchy over there worked when they were working on The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau made all, it went through him. He was the big honcho. Then you had all your directors for each episode. And they could make a lot of creative decisions. And then you had your writers who worked with them. So there was a lot of decision making there. But if there was a question about, how things would work, within universe, you went to Dave Filoni. He said yes or no. And also, he was the guy constantly reminding him, this is what George's vision was, what he would say. And you need somebody like that. And he's not the best director. Season 1 of The Mandalorian, his episodes were some of the just more bland ones, but you can tell he was important to the entire process. He kept everybody else in check and allowed the more auteurs to flourish. He allowed the Taika Waititis to do great things. Because Taika Waititi probably knows a lot about Star Wars. Doesn't know as much about as Dave Filoni, because Dave Filoni lives it. So, I think that's the first thing. Get people who really, really understand the source material. Even if it's just some position and he's just a consultant, he or she's entire job is just to kind of hold people accountable. They're not the writers, they're not the whoever, but just that's their thing. Just say, for a better sense, is this going to make the fans mad if we do this? Is this right? That needs to be their whole job. The second thing would be to stop westernizing Eastern properties. You saw this before with, Death Note is a really good example, which I also think was Netflix. And Netflix is also making a One Piece and a Gundam that could go fairly. Hope and prayers, people, hope and prayers. But they made Death Note, and they changed things to where the message wasn't the same. You have to understand that the people who write these shows, these especially animes, there's a different world understanding over there. There's a different mentality of how society works. So when you change that, you change the underlying foundation of how the story works. To give an example, Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is, for those who don't know, a show about this very militaristic world, which is of humanity, which is constantly under plague of these monsters, and the only way to kill them is to cut them in the nape of the neck. So you have to have soldiers to go out and fight them, and it creates this very militaristic future. The guy who wrote it was a very conservative, nationalistic person. And you can disagree or agree with their politics, but they would know. They're a big military history buff. They would know. They would know how that works. And they have the perspective and the vision for it. So then in later seasons, when they start going into like these isolationist or very authoritarian or totalitarian ideas and themes, it makes sense. They know how that works. And so when you start, if you were to change that to America, and instead of saying, oh, the reason we're fighting is not to protect the whole, but it's like, oh, for freedom, it doesn't work the same. And I'm, you know, politics, we won't get into that here, but just it wouldn't work the same. It's the same reason French movies are a lot different than American movies. Especially, you look at something like Breathless, and the first time I watching it, it confused me, and you had to watch it multiple times to start understanding it, because it's a different mindset. And that's not a bad thing. Neither is good nor bad, but you corrupt the original, and you lose the meaning, and then you get confused. You don't understand why people are mad at it, especially the fans, because it was made a certain way, and it isn't wrong. It can't be wrong if it's the original. It just can't. Because film and television are an art. Art is subjective. You can't be wrong about a subjective idea. And that ties into making politics in your shows and movies. Politics have always been in film. They need to be in film. It's how you express ideas. The problem is, it feels like today creators can't be clever and make a movie with a message. They have to just put the message in the movie, and there's a distinction. A movie, first and foremost, has to be entertaining and compelling. So I guess that's kind of my take on Bebop and the tragedy that there is, and it's a constantly repeating tragedy. Kind of feels like we can't stop doing it. Hopefully this is maybe one of the last ones, and I hate to see it happen to Cowboy Bebop. If you're wondering if you should go watch it, now that it's canceled, there's no point. Don't watch it, especially because it ends on a cliffhanger. It's not good enough to stand on its own, and it's really bad if you're an original fan, and it would just make you mad, and there's no hope of redemption now. So, if you want to watch something good, go watch Arcane. I'm going to do a review on it. That's all I got. If you like the video, like, subscribe, comment, all the YouTube isms. This has been Jolly about Netflix Cowboy Bebop.